Trump changing his story, this time revealing new details that he did not share in classified briefings with members of the House and Senate. Details about what he's said was an imminent threat against Americans from Iran and its top general.
Don't the American people have a right to know what specifically was targeted without revealing methods and sources?
Well, I don't think so, but we will tell you that probably it was going to be the embassy in Baghdad.
Did they have large-scale attacks planned for other embassies? And if those were planned, why can't we reveal that to the American people? Wouldn't that help your case?
I can reveal that I believe it would have been 4 embassies.
4 embassies. Yesterday morning, it was just one, and that one was in Baghdad.
We did it because they were looking to blow up our embassy.
Trump is asking Americans to trust him, right, on his decision to take out Soleimani, to trust him and not Congress with the big decision of whether to go to war. This is a very big ask because Trump's record when it comes to telling the truth is bad. And when it comes to numbers, well, here he is talking about the number of jobs the U.S. would lose if he tore up the U.S. arms deal with Saudi Arabia.
We're talking about over 40,000 jobs in the United States.
It's 450,000 jobs. It's 500,000 jobs, American jobs. I would prefer that we don't use as retribution canceling $110 billion worth of work, which means 600,000 jobs.
I think it's over 1 million jobs.
From 40,000 to over 1 million. You cannot make this up, even though he did. When it comes to Trump, accuracy does not matter. Making something sound big is what matters. And because Trump is out there now sharing classified information about 1 embassy, or maybe it was 4 embassies, and changing really important numbers, his chief defender, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, has been put in the hot seat. What embassy threats? How real? How imminent? Here he is over the past 24 hours.
We don't know precisely when, and we don't know precisely where, but it was real.
So Pompeo doesn't know when or where, but Trump is telling America it was Baghdad and 3 other embassies. So was this threat real and imminent? The American people do deserve to know the truth. And now the exact details, the numbers, the places, because tonight the credibility of the United States is on the line. Caitlin Collins is out front live outside the White House. And Caitlin, do we know what is behind the changing stories, the changing narrative that's come from the president?
No, that's really been the question facing them for several days now, and I don't think they did a lot to answer that today or to suffice the questions that their critics have been raising. And so that's been the big question, is why do we keep seeing these different reasons from different administration officials, ranging from the Pentagon to the State Department to the West Wing, over what it was that led the president to carry out this strike? And while so far the president's top national security aides have been reluctant to really reveal any information about this, you're seeing the president slowly do it himself by being the first person to say he believed they were plotting to blow up the embassy, then saying it was multiple, and then today being as specific as saying it was 4 embassies, though we should note the White House is declining to say what those other embassies are or whether they were warned that they were part of some plot that the president says they were planning. Now, the other big question that lawmakers have had and has been a big chief criticism is just how imminent this threat was going to be. And those questions only intensified after Pompeo said last night they didn't know exactly when that attack was going to happen, which would lead the question of how do you know exactly that it's imminent if you don't know when it's going to happen? And today, when I asked the Secretary of State what is his definition of the word imminent, he paused for a moment and then he answered like this, Erin. Secretary Pompeo, what is your definition of imminent?
This was going to happen, and American lives were at risk. And we would have been culpably negligent, as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said, we would have been culpably negligent had we not recommended to the president that he take this action in Qasem Soleimani.
Now, several lawmakers who were in those briefings with people like Pompeo and the defense secretary say that they were not told about a plot on 4 embassies or any embassies of the United States. And that is why another question being raised tonight, if this was so imminent, why were these lawmakers not told about this during these intelligence briefings on Capitol Hill this week?
All right, Caitlin, thank you very much. Obviously, some crucial questions here. I want to go out front now to Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan, who sits on the Homeland Security Committee. Senator, I appreciate your time. Were you aware that 4 embassies were being targeted by Iran and General Soleimani?
Look, I was in the classified briefing, and I'm just going to start by, one, thanking you for having me on, two, reiterating that General Soleimani was an enemy of the United States, had American blood on his hands. I'm glad he's no longer on this earth to orchestrate attacks against Americans. That being said, the briefing and now the lack of consistency from the administration just has been begging more questions than it is answering. We need to have additional briefings from the national security team so that we can drill down on the intelligence. As you know, the briefing was interrupted well before we all got a chance to ask the questions that would have helped us understand the full picture. And we need a strategy from this administration.
So did they give you did they tell you that there's 4 embassies or 3 embassies or 2 embassies or 1 embassy or anything about the plot? I mean, did you have any of this information or did you learn it from Fox News?
I have been very concerned. I'm not going to discuss details of what I heard in a classified briefing, but I am going to say that there has been this evolving, contradictory set of stories, which again speaks to not only the need for us to have a full briefing, but it speaks to the importance of having a full-fledged discussion and debate about the War Powers Act.
And I'm sorry to keep pushing on this, but I'm just really trying to understand. I know you can't share it was in a classified briefing, Senator, but you keep using the word contradictory. So you're letting us know that there's something in here about what he's saying and what you heard that is inconsistent, just to make sure we understand.
That is in fact true. Yes.
Okay. All right. So this being said, so he briefed. Go ahead.
Yeah. We were pushing for details that would have allowed us to assess whether we thought the threat was imminent, for instance. There is no question that Iran is a malevolent force, that it has, and its proxies have attacked and sponsored attacks on U.S. troops and our allies and Americans and our interests. And all of those things are true. But when you are looking at whether the president was acting within his Article 2 powers to prevent to go after an imminent threat to prevent our troops, or whether this was rightly something that he needed to come to Congress about so that we could be clear, not only as members of Congress, but so that the American people can understand what the threat is and what the mission should be and whether we're going to have a sustained conflict and what the strategy now is for preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon,
so in terms of
de-escalating.
Yes. The nature, in terms of the nature of the threat itself, there's contradictory information from what you're saying and what he's now saying. There's also this issue, which you just raised, Senator, about imminent. And the reason this word matters for people who wonder why there's such an obsession about it, right, is exactly what you say, right? If something is imminent, the president has the authority to act without the approval of Congress in a potential act of war. So that's why the word matters. Senator Chris Murphy tweeted today in part, quote, either Fox News gets higher level briefings than Congress or, wait for it, there was no such imminent threat, referring, of course, to the interview, which I just played a portion of, right, with Laura Ingraham, where the president talked about the attack on 4 embassies. Do you feel confident that you've been given any information that proves imminence?
That would be what I would want to be able to go back to a second briefing about. There is no doubt that we can talk about Iran being a threat to the United States. It has been for years. It continues to be.
Right, but that's different
we
than a
need to
specific
understand what that
imminent...
is. That is exactly right, and that is why this whole conversation is so important, and that is why it is so important for us to have a discussion in both chambers of Congress to make sure that we understand what the threat is that the administration sees, what its strategy is going forward. We all agree Iran is a malevolent actor, but we need to make sure we have a strategy working with our allies to keep it from getting a nuclear bomb, to protect our U.S. troops and our U.S. interests in the Middle East, but all around the globe. And that's what we are not hearing from this administration, and that concerns me greatly.
So the Wall Street Journal reports tonight, Senator, Mr. Trump, after the strike, I'm reading from the paper, told associates that he was under pressure to deal with General Soleimani from GOP senators he views as important supporters of his in his coming impeachment trial in the Senate, associates said. Are you comfortable at this point saying that his decision to do this strike had something to do with impeachment, or do you think that is a bridge too far?
I am concerned about what the Wall Street Journal reported, but I think that report and the question that is suggested in that report is precisely why the national security team of this administration needs to come to Congress first to brief us with specificity on the intelligence that gave rise to their assessment that they told us that it was an imminent threat, although, as you have pointed out, we are hearing contradictory accounts about that very issue. But it also speaks to why it is so important to fully include the American people in a discussion about a sustained conflict, a war against a foreign power. Our founders understood that if we were going to have a sustained war against a foreign power, that the American people needed to understand, because it is their blood and treasure on the line there. Yes. And they need to be fully participating so they know what the mission is. And that would alleviate some of the concerns raised by the Wall Street Journal.